The cafeteria at Jefferson High School was a glittering fortress of privilege, its polished chrome fixtures catching the midday light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. At exactly 12:15 p.m., the heavy double doors slammed shut with a clang that ricocheted off the tiled walls, a sound sharp enough to make Maya Carter's shoulders tense. She sat alone at a corner table, her worn sneakers tucked under her chair, the faint scent of her peanut butter sandwich mingling with the upscale aroma of sushi and artisanal pizza wafting from nearby stations. This wasn't the cramped, cozy lunchroom of her old school in rural Indiana, where laughter bounced freely and everyone knew your name. No, this was a battleground, a sprawling food court that could shame a city mall, where every table was a territory, every glance a claim. Maya, 16 and new, was an intruder here, her academic scholarship a flimsy shield against the school's unforgiving social order. Athletes sprawled at the central tables, their Letterman jackets a badge of dominance, while the rich kids lounged by the courtyard windows, their designer bags strewn carelessly across polished surfaces. Art students huddled near the stage, sketching in quiet rebellion, and everyone else, those without a tribe, orbited the edges, like moths drawn to a flame they couldn't touch. Maya, a scholarship kid, was the lowest of them all, a charity case, in their whispered taunts, her presence an affront to the gleaming hierarchy. I gripped my sandwich, the wax paper crinkling under my fingers, and kept my eyes down, pretending I didn't feel the weight of their stares. 3 weeks at Jefferson High, and it felt like 3 lifetimes. Back in Indiana, lunch was a time to breathe, to swap stories with friends over soggy fries. Here, every bite was a performance, every moment a test. Mom had pushed for this move, her voice bright with hope after the divorce. "A fresh start, Maya," she'd said, her hands smoothing my hair. "Jefferson's one of the best schools in Illinois. Your scholarship's your ticket to something bigger." But bigger felt like colder, lonelier, sharper. I missed the creaky wooden desks of my old school, the way the janitor knew my name. Here, even the air felt expensive, heavy with the scent of wealth I couldn't afford. I tried to blend in, my discount store jeans and knockoff backpack a poor disguise among kids who wore sneakers worth more than our rent. I thought if I stayed quiet, kept my head down, I'd slip through unnoticed. But Ethan Marshall had other plans. Ethan was Jefferson High's golden king, 6'2" with blonde hair styled like he'd stepped off a magazine cover, his confidence a weapon honed by a life without no. His father, Charles Marshall, owned 3 luxury car dealerships, his donations funding the school's gleaming athletic center. Ethan didn't just walk the hall, she ruled them, his charm a velvet glove over a fist of calculated cruelty. His crew Lucas Rivera, Noah Bennett, and Liam Harper were his shadows, each from the same gated community, their loyalty cemented by shared privilege. They moved like wolves, their designer sneakers silent on the polished floors, their laughter a signal that someone was about to bleed. I'd felt their eyes on me from day one, their snickers trailing me like smoke. It started small, a brush of malice I could almost ignore. A muttered charity case as I passed in the hallway, my books accidentally knocked from my arms, the sharp sting of whispers about my thrift store sweater. I swallowed it all, Mom's words looping in my mind. "Kill them with kindness, Maya. Show them you're better than their games." But kindness felt like surrender, and their games were relentless. Last week, he made a mistake he didn't even see coming. The cafeteria was nearly empty during early morning study hall, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the tables. I needed good light for my calculus homework, so I sat near the windows, my pencil scratching equations as the quiet wrapped around me. I didn't know it was Ethan's table, his unspoken throne. When he arrived, his shadow fell over my notebook, his voice slicing through the silence. "What's this?" he said, loud enough for the few kids nearby to turn. "Certain people need to learn their place." His eyes locked on mine, blue and cold, daring me to argue. My cheeks burned, but I didn't speak. I gathered my things, my hands trembling, and moved to the corner table by the emergency exit. The damage was done. I'd challenged his kingdom, however unknowingly, and Ethan Marshall didn't forgive. Since then, the harassment had sharpened, a blade honed for precision. My locker was vandalized yesterday. "Know your place," scrawled in thick black marker across the metal. I reported it to Mrs. Jenkins, the guidance counselor, her office smelling of lavender and regret. "Without proof, Maya," she said, her voice soft but final, "there's not much we can do. Try to avoid trouble." Avoid trouble? Trouble was Ethan, his crew, this whole school that bowed to his father's money. I wanted to scream, to tell her proof was in the smirks they didn't hide, but I just nodded, my throat tight. I walked back to the cafeteria today, my heart a drumbeat, knowing something was coming. I could feel it in the way the air shifted, the way conversations hushed as I passed. Ethan was planning something, and I was the target. I sat at my usual table, the emergency exit a cold comfort at my back, and unwrapped my sandwich. The cafeteria buzzed around me, a symphony of clinking trays and laughter, but it felt like a stage, and I was the unwilling star. I took a bite, the peanut butter sticking to the roof of my mouth, and tried to focus on my breathing. Just get through lunch, I told myself, 1 hour at a time. But then I heard it the squeak of sneakers, deliberate and slow, cutting through the noise. I looked up, and there he was. Ethan Marshall. His smile a blade, his crew fanning out behind him like soldiers. My stomach twisted, a cold knot of dread. "Hey, scholarship," he said, his voice smooth as poison, loud enough for nearby tables to quiet. "Enjoying your lunch?" I kept my eyes on my sandwich, my fingers tightening around the wax paper. Don't engage, I thought, but my pulse raced, betraying me. "Just trying to eat in peace, Ethan," I said, my voice quieter than I wanted, barely steady. He laughed, a sound sharp and hollow, like breaking glass. "Peace?" he said, leaning closer, his cologne sharp and expensive. "That's funny. See, I've been thinking, Maya, you being Haaretz, disrupting the peace of our school." Lucas, Noah, and Liam closed in, their movements casual but deliberate, forming a semicircle around my table. I glanced around, seeing heads turn, phones sliding out of pockets. The cafeteria was watching, waiting for the show. My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This wasn't just another jab, another whisper. This was different planned, public, personal. I wanted to run, to vanish, but there was no escape. The emergency exit was steps away, but it would trigger an alarm, and the main doors were too far, blocked by Ethan's crew and the weight of 100 staring eyes. I was trapped, and they knew it. "I'm not trying to disrupt anything," I said, forcing my voice to hold, though it trembled at the edges. "I'm just here to learn." Noah scoffed, his smirk cutting. "Learn? What could someone like you teach us?" Lucas leaned in, his breath hot against my ear. "Your kind should stick to schools in your neighborhood. This charity experiment's a bust. Your kind." The words landed like a slap, heavy with venom, stripping me down to nothing but my scholarship, my poverty, my difference. I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging into my palms. I wanted to scream that my test scores matched theirs, that I'd earned my place, but Ethan cut me off, his voice mocking. "Test scores," he said, drawing out the words. "Right, because that's all that matters. Not whether you fit in, not whether you belong, not whether you drag down the whole standard of this place." Liam moved behind my chair, completing the circle, his shadow falling over me. The cafeteria's noise faded to a low hum, the world narrowing to this moment, this table, this fight I didn't choose. I could see phones raised, their lenses glinting like eyes, recording my humiliation. Part of me was glad vidance, finally, but another part burned with shame, knowing I was their entertainment. I stood, my chair scraping the floor, my legs unsteady. "I think I should go," I said, but Ethan's hand slammed down on my lunch bag, crushing the apple inside. The sound was loud, startling, a gunshot in the silence. "I don't remember giving you permission to leave," he said, his eyes narrowing, his control slipping just enough to show the ugliness beneath. I met his gaze, my fear twisting into something harder, something defiant. "I don't need your permission," I said, and the words surprised me, firm and clear, like they belonged to someone braver. Ethan's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to this, to a scholarship kid who didn't cower. The air crackled with tension, the cafeteria holding its breath, waiting for his next move. I braced myself, knowing whatever came next would be worse, knowing I was alone in this glittering, hostile world. But what none of us knew, not Ethan, not his crew, not even me, was that my father, James Carter, was already on his way, his truck speeding toward Jefferson High, his military instincts sharp and ready. The cafeteria, with its gleaming surfaces and unspoken rules, was about to become a battlefield of a different kind, and the king was about to meet his match. The air in Jefferson High's cafeteria thickened, a storm brewing in the hum of hushed voices and clinking trays. Maya Carter sat at her corner table, the emergency exit a cold, mocking promise at her back, her peanut butter sandwich forgotten, as Ethan Marshall's shadow loomed closer. His designer sneakers squeaked deliberately on the polished floor, each step a calculated note in a symphony of intimidation. 3 weeks into her scholarship at this elite Chicago suburb school, Maya had learned to navigate its unspoken rules, but nothing prepared her for this. The social hierarchy, as rigid as the chrome fixtures gleaming under fluorescent lights, had marked her as an outsider from day one. Ethan, the school's untouchable prince, had taken her accidental claim on his study hall table as a personal affront, and now his campaign against her was escalating from whispers to warfare. I clutched the edge of my chair, my knuckles whitening, trying to anchor myself against the tide of dread. Ethan's crew, Lucas Rivera, Noah Bennett, Liam Harper, fanned out around me, their smirks sharp as blades, their expensive colognes a suffocating cloud. I'd thought I could handle the small stuff, the hallway taunts, the accidental shoves, the whispers about my knockoff backpack. Mom's voice echoed in my head, kill them with kindness. But kindness was crumbling under their relentless cruelty. Last week, I'd sat at the wrong table. A near-empty cafeteria, my only crime scene. Ethan's voice had boomed, certain people need to learn their place, and I'd slunk away, my cheeks burning, thinking it would end there. I was wrong. The harassment had sharpened, each jab more precise. My locker, once a small sanctuary, was now a canvas for their venom. Know your place scrawled in black marker, the words dripping like blood across the metal. I'd stood there, my hands shaking as I scrubbed at it with a tissue, the janitor's sympathetic glance my only witness. Then came the fake social media account, a cruel caricature of me, photoshopped images of my face on humiliating memes, shared and liked by faceless classmates. I reported it to Mrs. Jenkins, her lavender-scented office a false promise of safety. Without proof of who did it, Maya, she'd said, her eyes avoiding mine, there's little we can do. Try to stay out of trouble. Trouble? Trouble was Ethan's father, Charles Marshall, whose car dealership, empire, and fat donations to the school's athletic center bought his son immunity. Trouble was this glittering fortress where money trumped merit. During gym class, my clothes vanished from my locker, forcing me to run laps in my jeans while laughter chased me around the track. I'd reported that too, but Mrs. Jenkins just sighed. No proof, she said, and I wanted to scream that proof was in Ethan's smirk, in the way his crew never hid their glee. Now, in the cafeteria, the air was electric with anticipation, the usual chaos dimming as students sensed a spectacle. Ethan slid into the chair across from me, his posture casual but his eyes predatory, like a cat toying with a trapped mouse. "Hey, scholarship," he said, his voice a syrupy mockery of warmth, loud enough to draw stares. "Enjoying your lunch?" I stared at my sandwich, the wax paper crinkling under my trembling fingers, willing my heart to slow. Don't give him the satisfaction, I thought, but my pulse was a traitor, hammering in my ears. "Just trying to eat in peace, Ethan," I said, my voice low, a fragile thread of calm. He laughed, a sound like shattering ice, devoid of joy. "Peace?" he said, leaning forward, his breath hot with mint gum. "Funny thing, Maya. Your whole situation here's messing with the peace of our school." Lucas, Noah, and Liam tightened their circle, their movements choreographed, strategic, cutting off any escape. Lucas leaned against the table, his arm brushing my tray, a deliberate invasion. Noah stood to my left, his arms crossed, his smirk a silent dare. Liam lingered behind me, his shadow heavy, completing the trap. Phones emerged from pockets, their lenses glinting like vultures' eyes, recording my humiliation for their social media feeds. My stomach churned, a mix of fear and fury. This wasn't random. This was a performance, planned to put me in my place, to remind everyone that scholarship kids didn't belong in their polished world. I glanced at the emergency exit, its red sign taunting my freedom, but at the cost of an alarm that would only amplify my shame. The main doors were too far, blocked by Ethan's crew and the weight of 100 curious gazes. I was cornered, and they knew it. "I'm not trying to disrupt anything," I said, forcing my voice to hold steady, though it wavered like a candle in a storm. "I'm just here to learn." Noah scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "Learn? What's someone like you got to teach us?" Lucas leaned closer, his cologne stinging my nose. "Your kind should stick to schools in your own neighborhood," he said, the words slow and deliberate, each one a jab to my core. "This charity case experiment's not working out. Your kind." The phrase hit like a fist, stripping me bare, reducing me to my thrift store clothes, my mom's 2 jobs, the scholarship that was supposed to be my ticket but felt like a curse. My nails dug into my palms, the pain grounding me. I wanted to shrink, to disappear, but something inside me snapped taut, like a wire stretched to breaking. My test scores earned me a place here, I said, my voice steadier now, a spark of defiance flaring. Same as anyone else. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his smile twisting into something uglier. Test scores, he repeated, mocking, drawing out the syllables. Right, because that's all that matters. Not whether you fit in, not whether you belong, not whether your presence drags down the whole standard of this place. His words were a blade, slicing at my worth, my existence. Liam shifted behind me, his presence a weight on my shoulders, the circle tightening like a noose. The cafeteria's noise had faded to a low murmur, the clatter of trays and chatter replaced by the hum of anticipation. Students leaned forward, phones raised, their faces a blur of curiosity and cowardice. I could feel their eyes, their judgment, their hunger for drama. Part of me was grateful for the camera spoof, at last, something Mrs. Jenkins couldn't dismiss. But another part burned with shame, knowing I was their spectacle, my pain, their lunchtime entertainment. I stood, my chair scraping the floor, my legs unsteady but my resolve hardening. I think I should go, I said, my voice cutting through the silence, a small act of rebellion. Ethan's hand slammed down on my lunch bag, the apple inside crunching under his palm, the sound loud and jarring, like a bone snapping. I don't remember giving you permission to leave, he said, his voice low, dangerous, his control fraying at the edges. The cafeteria was a held breath, every eye on us, every phone a silent witness. I met his gaze, my fear twisting into something sharp and unyielding. I don't need your permission, I said, the words ringing clear, surprising even me with their strength. Ethan's jaw clenched, his mask of charm slipping, revealing the cruelty beneath. He wasn't used to this, to a scholarship kid who didn't beg or break. The air crackled, charged with the promise of something worse. Lucas and Noah exchanged glances, their smirks faltering, sensing the shift. Liam's shadow loomed closer, his breath audible behind me. I braced myself, my mind racing calculate, escape, survive. The nearest teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, was across the cafeteria, oblivious, stirring his coffee. The emergency exit would set off an alarm. The main doors were a gauntlet I couldn't run. You know what your problem is? Ethan said, standing now, towering over me, his voice a low growl. You don't understand the natural order. Some people are born to lead, to succeed, to matter. And some people, he gestured at me, dismissive, like I was nothing, are born to serve coffee to the first group. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be. My face burned, fury and shame warring inside me. My mom serves coffee, I said, my voice clear, cutting through the silence. She works 2 jobs to keep us going. She's worth 10 of you. The words hung in the air, a challenge, a truth I hadn't meant to speak but couldn't hold back. Ethan's face flushed, a deep, angry red. Nobody talked back to Ethan Marshall. Nobody. Grab her bag. He snapped at Ham, his voice sharp with rage. Before I could react, Liam snatched my backpack from the table, his fingers rough, proprietary. My heart lurched as he unzipped it, and I knew what was coming. This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. This was about destruction, about erasing me from their world. The cafeteria watched, silent, complicit, as Ethan's crew prepared to tear apart everything I'd fought to hold together. But what they didn't know, what none of us knew, was that my father, James Carter, was already crossing the parking lot, his boots heavy on the asphalt, his military instincts honed and ready. The glittering fortress of Jefferson High was about to meet a force it couldn't ignore, and the balance of power was about to shift. The cafeteria at Jefferson High School was a frozen tableau, its usual clamor of trays and chatter reduced to a tense hum, the air thick with the weight of 100 watching eyes. Maya Carter stood pinned against the cold cinderblock wall, her heart a frantic drumbeat as Ethan Marshall's crew Lucas Rivera, Noah Bennett, and Liam Harper closed their trap around her. The polished chrome of the food stations gleamed mockingly under the fluorescent lights, reflecting the faces of students who held up phones, their lenses capturing every second of Maya's humiliation. Ethan, his blonde hair catching the light like a crown, stood at the center of it all, his designer sneakers planted firmly on the tiled floor, his smirk a blade honed by privilege. He held Maya's used calculus textbook, its protective plastic cover crinkling in his grip, each page he ripped out fluttering to the ground like ash from a dying fire. Lucas and Noah gripped her arms, their fingers digging into her skin, while Liam loomed behind, his shadow a heavy weight on her shoulders. The emergency exit, just steps away, taunted her with its red glow and escape that would trigger an alarm and amplify her shame. I pressed my back against the wall, the cold seeping through my thin sweater, my breath shallow and sharp. My backpack lay gutted on the floor, its contents textbooks, notebooks, the calculator I'd saved months, scattered like the wreckage of my dreams. Ethan's eyes glinted with cruel delight as he tore another page, the sound a gunshot in the silence. "You know what?" he said, his voice low, venomous. "I don't think you need this anymore. Scholarship. Charity case is over." My throat tightened, a scream trapped behind my teeth. That book cost $40, money Mom scraped together from extra shifts, her hands always smelling faintly of coffee grounds. I wanted to lunge, to snatch it back, but Lucas and Noah's grip was iron, their smirks daring me to try. The cafeteria was a sea of faces, some whispering, some gasping, but none moving to help. Phones recorded every second, their cold lenses turning my pain into a spectacle. Part of me clung to that evidence. Finally, something Mrs. Jenkins couldn't dismiss. But another part burned, knowing I was their entertainment, a scholarship kid who dared to exist in their glittering world. "Stop," I said, my voice cracking, raw with desperation. "Please, stop." Ethan mimicked me, his tone high and cruel. "Please, stop," he sneered, letting another page drift to the floor. "Now you're begging. Too late for that." My legs trembled, but I lifted my chin, defiance flaring through the fear. "Pick it up yourself," I said, the words sharp, surprising me with their strength. The cafeteria inhaled, a collective gasp, as Ethan's face darkened. He wasn't used to this, to a girl who didn't cower. "You don't get it," he said, stepping closer, raising the textbook like a weapon. For a terrifying moment, I thought he'd hit me, his eyes wild with something uglier than anger. Lucas tightened his grip. Noah leaned in, their breaths hot and mocking. "What's it gonna be, Charity?" Noah said, his voice a low taunt. "You gonna cry now?" I jerked against their hold, panic clawing at my chest, but there was nowhere to go. The wall was unyielding, the fluorescent lights harsh, the smell of pizza and fear nauseating. Mr. Rodriguez, the nearest teacher, was across the room, stirring his coffee, oblivious to the drama unfolding. The main doors were a distant dream, blocked by Ethan's crew and the weight of the crowd's stares. "Last chance," Ethan said, his voice a growl. "Pick up your stuff. Apologize for existing in our space, or this gets worse." My heart raced, calculating fight, run, survive, but every option felt like a trap. I met his gaze, my voice shaking but steady. "No," I said. A single word, a line drawn in the sand. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his control slipping, and he nodded to his friends. "Hold her," he said, and Lucas and Noah tightened their grip, my arms burning under their hands. Liam swept my remaining lunch off the table, my water bottle hitting the floor, its contents pooling across the tiles like spilled blood. A few students called out in protest. "Hey, that's too far!" But their voices were weak, drowned by the silence of the majority. I struggled, my sneakers slipping on the slick floor, panic rising like bile. "Let go!" I shouted, my voice raw, breaking through the quiet. Ethan raised the textbook higher, his smirk twisting into something feral, and I braced myself for the blow. Then the cafeteria doors burst open, the sound a thunderclap that silenced every whisper, every breath. James Carter, my father, strode in 6'4", broad as a linebacker, his faded jeans and Foster construction work shirt a stark contrast to the cafeteria's polished sheen. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with a controlled fury I'd never seen, a relic of his 3 tours in Afghanistan. The room seemed to shrink, the air growing colder, heavier, as he moved with the precision of a soldier, his boots steady on the tiles. Students parted like water, phones still recording, their lenses now fixed on him. "Let her go," he said, each word carved from steel, his voice low but carrying the weight of command. Lucas and Noah dropped my arms instantly, stepping back as if I'd caught fire. My knees buckled, but I stayed upright, my breath ragged. Ethan, still holding my ruined textbook, tried to hold his ground, his voice forcing bravado. "And you are?" he said, tilting his chin, but his hands shook, betraying him. Dad stepped closer, his shadow swallowing Ethan's. "The father of the girl you're assaulting," he said, his tone unyielding, each syllable a warning. "Also, someone who's about to teach you a lesson your daddy's money should have paid for years ago." The cafeteria was a held breath, the vending machines hummed the only sound. Ethan's smirk faltered, his eyes darting to his crew, who were already retreating, their loyalty crumbling under Dad's gaze. I stood there, my arms stinging, my heart pounding, but something new stirred inside Mere Leaf. Yes, but also a spark of hope. Dad was here, and he saw everything. The phones were still recording, their lenses now allies, capturing the moment Ethan Marshall's reign began to crack. I looked at him, his face pale, his confidence unraveling, and for the first time, I felt the balance shift. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was ours, and the glittering fortress of Jefferson High was about to learn what happens when a father's love meets a bully's cruelty. The cafeteria at Jefferson High School stood frozen, its polished surfaces reflecting the stunned faces of students clutching phones, their lenses still trained on the unfolding drama. The air was thick with the scent of sushi and tension, the hum of vending machines a faint pulse beneath the silence. Maya Carter, her arms still stinging from Lucas Rivera and Noah Bennett's grip, stood by the cold cinder-block wall, her scattered belongings textbooks, notebooks, a shattered calculator littering the tiled floor like battle debris. Ethan Marshall, his blonde hair no longer a crown but a disheveled mask, clutched her torn calculus textbook, his knuckles white, his smirk gone. James Carter, Maya's father, loomed over him, 6'4" of ex-military resolve, his work shirt's Foster construction patch a quiet rebuke to Ethan's designer sneakers. His voice, steady as a drill sergeant's, cut through the room, each word a hammer strike. "You've got two choices," he said, his eyes locking onto Ethan's, unyielding, unflinching. "Option 1. You and your friends clean up every single item you threw on this floor. You apologize to my daughter, a real apology, not some half-hearted mumble. You pay for the textbook you destroyed, and you never come within 50 feet of her again. Option 2. We go to Principal Thompson right now, I file police reports, and we let the legal system decide your future. Choose." The cafeteria held its breath, the weight of James's words pressing down like gravity. Ethan's face, once flushed with arrogance, drained to a sickly pale, his eyes darting to Lucas, Noah, and Liam Harper, who shifted uneasily, their loyalty fraying. Students whispered, phones still recording, their lenses now capturing Ethan's unraveling, his kingdom crumbling under the gaze of a man who'd faced worse than teenage bullies in war zones. I stood there, my legs shaky but my spine straight, my heart a wild mix of fear and something new hope, maybe, or the first flicker of power. Dad's voice was my anchor, steady and sure, pulling me back from the edge of panic. I could still feel Luca's and Noah's fingers on my arms, the burn of their grip, the weight of Ethan's words, charity case. Your kind cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. But now, with Dad here, the cafeteria didn't feel like a trap anymore. It felt like a stage, and Ethan wasn't the star. He was the villain, and everyone saw it. The phones, those cold, glinting eyes, were no longer just spectators. They were witnesses, their footage a weapon Ethan couldn't buy his way out of. "This is a threat," Ethan stammered, pulling out his phone, his voice grasping for control. "I'll call the police. You can't just—" Dad's smile was sharp, dangerous, not reaching his eyes. "Go ahead, call them," he said, stepping closer, his boots heavy on the tiles. "Explain how I walked in on you, and 3 other boys restraining my minor daughter, destroying her property. I'm sure they'll love the video evidence: battery, assault, theft, destruction of property. Your father's lawyers are good, but they're not that good." Ethan's hand froze, the phone useless in his grip. His crew backed away, Lucas muttering, "Man, just," but trailing off, his courage evaporating. The crowd's murmurs grew, a tide turning, their admiration for Ethan shifting to something else: judgment, maybe pity. I saw it in their faces, the way they looked at him now, like he was no longer untouchable. My chest loosened, just a fraction, as I realized I wasn't invisible anymore. Dad bent down, picking up my notebook, his calloused hands smoothing the crumpled pages with a gentleness that made my throat tighten. "Here's another joke," he said, straightening, his voice calm but edged with steel. "I've got a meeting with Principal Thompson in 10 minutes. Came to pick Maya up for a doctor's appointment, but imagine my surprise when I couldn't find her in the attendance office. Even more surprising when a young lady in the hallway, nice girl, by the way, told me I might want to check the cafeteria, said something was going down with my daughter. He fixed Ethan with a stare that could have stopped a tank, the kind he must have used on soldiers in Afghanistan. So, what's it gonna be? Option 1 or option 2? I watched Ethan's face, waiting for the defiance, the smirk, but it didn't come. He looked small, suddenly, his shoulders hunched, his eyes flicking to the crowd, to his crew, to the phone still recording. "Tyler, just do it," Lucas hissed, his voice low, desperate. "My father will," Ethan started, but Dad cut him off, his voice a quiet blade. "Your father will what? Buy your way out again? Not this time. See, I did some research, Ethan Marshall. 3 incidents at your old school before your dad donated a new library wing. 2 restraining orders from girls that vanished. A sealed juvenile record I'm betting has more of the same. Your dad's money's been cleaning your messes for years. That ends today." The words landed like grenades, each one blasting away Ethan's armor. The crowd stirred, whispers growing louder, phones catching every second. Someone had started a live stream, the views ticking up like a heartbeat. I spoke, my voice soft but clear, surprising even me. "The textbook cost $78 new. I bought it used for $40. Dad nodded, not breaking eye contact with Ethan. $78 it is. Plus tax. Call it $90 for the emotional distress." Ethan's mouth opened, then closed, a fish gasping for air. "That's extortion," he protested, but his voice was weak, a boy's, not a king's. "No," Dad corrected, his tone steady, unyielding. "Extortion is using your wealth to terrorize a 16-year-old girl who just wants an education. What I'm doing is called consequences." The cafeteria doors swung open again, less violently this time, but with enough force to draw every eye. Principal Thompson strode in, his suit crisp but his face grim, flanked by 2 security guards and a cluster of teachers. The crowd parted, a sea splitting, as he surveyed the scene belongings scattered, torn pages like snow on the tiles, Ethan and his crew frozen in guilt, Dad standing like a mountain in the center of it all. "What's going on here?" Thompson demanded, his voice sharp, cutting through the murmurs. Before Ethan could spin a lie, a dozen students thrust their phones forward, voices overlapping. "We got it all on video, Principal Thompson," one shouted. "They attacked her," another called. "It's been going on for weeks." The principal's eyes darkened, taking in the wreckage, the guilty faces, my dad's unyielding presence. "Mr. Carter, I presume," he said, his tone measured. "We spoke last week about Maya's concerns." Dad nodded, his voice even but heavy with accusation. "We did. You said you needed evidence. Looks like Christmas came early." Ethan tried one last time, his voice desperate. "Principal Thompson, it's a misunderstanding. We were just talking." "Save it, Marshall," Thompson snapped, his patience gone. "Security, escort Mr. Marshall and his friends to my office. Mr. Carter, Maya, please join us. The rest of you, lunch is over. Clear out." The security guards moved toward Ethan's crew, their radios crackling. Ethan made a final, desperate play, his voice rising. "You don't know who you're messing with," he told Dad, his eyes wild. "My father owns half this town. We'll bury you." Dad laughed, a deep, genuine sound that startled everyone, even me. "Son, I've been threatened by Taliban warlords and experts, men who knew how to fight. You think your daddy's car dealerships scare me? I've faced real monsters. You're just a spoiled kid who's about to learn actions have consequences." He turned to me, his arm gentle around my shoulders, his voice soft but firm. "You okay, baby girl?" I nodded, tears prickling now that the danger was easing, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry you had to deal with this, Dad." He shook his head, his eyes fierce with love. "Never apologize for their cruelty, Maya. You stood up to them. You showed more courage than anyone in this room. I'm proud of you." As we followed Principal Thompson out, leaving Ethan and his crew to the security guards, the cafeteria erupted into chaos behind us. Phones pinged, notifications spreading like wildfire, the videos already taking on a life of their own. I glanced back, catching Ethan's eye through the conference room's glass walls. For the first time, there was no sneer, no swagger, just fear, raw and real. The walk to Thompson's office felt endless, my mind replaying the last 15 minutes, a whirlwind of terror and triumph. Had that really happened? Had Dad really faced down Ethan Marshall? I felt his arm around me, steady, protective, and knew one thing for certain. I wasn't alone anymore. The glittering fortress of Jefferson High, with its chrome and privilege, had cracked, and I was no longer just the scholarship kid. I was Maya Carter, and my voice was starting to matter. The cafeteria at Jefferson High School was a ghost of its earlier chaos as Maya Carter and her father, James, stepped out into the late afternoon light, the heavy doors closing behind them with a muted thud. The polished chrome and gleaming tiles faded into memory, replaced by the hum of a different world, one buzzing with outrage and solidarity. The videos of Ethan Marshall and his crew's assault on Maya had spread like wildfire across social media, their grainy frames capturing every torn page, every sneer, every moment of her defiance. By the time Maya and James reached a small diner 5 miles from school, the clips were trending locally as number cafeteria justice, the views climbing into the thousands, each share amplifying the story of a scholarship girl who refused to break. The diner's worn booths and coffee-stained counter were a stark contrast to Jefferson's upscale food court, but the warmth of its flickering neon sign felt like a refuge. Outside, news vans lined the school's parking lot, their antennas piercing the sky, while parents clustered in angry knots, demanding answers. Inside the Carters' small apartment, the working-class community of their new Chicago suburb rallied around them, neighbors they barely knew arriving with food and words of support. I sat at the diner's scratched table, picking at a pile of French fries, my phone buzzing relentlessly on the Formica surface. Notifications flooded in-friend requests from classmates who'd never glanced my way, tags and posts I couldn't bear to read, messages from strangers calling me brave. I turned the phone face down, my fingers trembling, the weight of it all too much. Dad watched me, his broad hands wrapped around a coffee mug, his eyes soft but searching. "You sure you're okay, baby girl?" he asked for the third time, his voice a low rumble, the same one that had silenced Ethan's bravado. I nodded, but my throat was tight, tears threatening to spill. I can't believe you showed up when you did," I said, my voice small, frayed at the edges. "How did you know?" Dad's smile was gentle, the hard edges from the cafeteria softening. "A girl in the parking lot, Sophie Reynolds," she said her name was, "practically dragged me inside, said something was happening to you. Said she'd watched Ethan target you for weeks and couldn't stand it anymore." Sophie Reynolds. The name hit me like a shockwave. Student council vice president, always poised, always surrounded by the right people, the kind who never noticed me. I'd seen her in the halls, her perfect ponytail swinging, her laugh bright but distant. "She's never even talked to me," I said, my voice catching, disbelief mixing with gratitude. Dad took a sip of his coffee, the steam curling around his face. "Well, seems she's got a conscience. Sometimes good people just need to see someone take a stand before they find their own courage." I stared at the fries, their golden edges blurring as my eyes stung. Courage. Was that what I'd shown? All I'd felt was fear, sharp and suffocating, until Dad walked in. But now, with the videos spreading, with the world watching, I felt something else, a flicker of power, like a match catching flame. Back at Jefferson High, the afternoon had descended into pandemonium. The school's phone lines were jammed with furious calls from parents, their voices echoing through the office as they demanded accountability. News vans multiplied, their reporters setting up cameras in the parking lot, their microphones hungry for a soundbite. In Principal Thompson's office, Charles Marshall, Ethan's father, paced like a caged lion, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the crumpled resignation on his face. He watched the cafeteria footage for the 4th time, his jaw tight, his confidence faltering. "This is obviously edited," he declared, though his voice lacked conviction, a man grasping at straws. "My son was provoked. That girl must have—" Principal Thompson cut him off, his tone weary but firm. "Mr. Marshall, we have 43 videos from different angles. They all show the same thing. Your son and his friends surrounded, restrained, and assaulted a female student while destroying her property. Ethan, sitting in a chair, his usual swagger gone, burst out, 'It was a prank. We were just messing around.' Vice Principal Harris, silent until now, leaned forward, her eyes sharp. 'A prank? You held a girl against her will, destroyed her textbook, dumped her belongings. Which part of that was funny, Mr. Marshall?' Charles stopped pacing, his face reddening. 'What are you suggesting? Detention? Community service? I'm sure we can work something out.' Thompson shook his head, his fingers steepled. This goes beyond detention, Mr. Marshall. We're looking at a minimum 3-day suspension, pending a full disciplinary hearing. The school board will be involved, and if Miss Carter's family presses charges, criminal proceedings could follow. Charles's face flushed deeper, his voice rising. Criminal? For a schoolyard scuffle? Do you know how much I donate to this school? Thompson's gaze didn't waver. I'm aware of your contributions, but they don't exempt your son from consequences. Our zero-tolerance policy on bullying and assault applies to everyone. Charles scoffed, his tone biting. Since when? Ethan's been in trouble before, and it's always been handled quietly. Why is this different? Thompson gestured to his computer screen, where social media feeds showed the videos spreading like wildfire. Because the entire world is watching, Mr. Marshall. We can't sweep this under the rug, even if we wanted to, which, for the record, we don't. Across the school, similar scenes unfolded. Lucas Rivera's mother watched the video with tears streaming down her face, horrified at her son's cruelty. Noah Bennett's parents, both lawyers, were already strategizing damage control, their voices clipped and urgent. Liam Harper's father, a respected surgeon, couldn't meet his son's eyes. I'm disappointed doesn't begin to cover it, Dr. Harper said, his voice low, wounded. We raised you better. How could you terrorize that girl? Liam hung his head, his usual bravado gone. Ethan said she didn't belong, he mumbled. Said she was bringing down the school's reputation. His mother's voice was sharp, cutting through his excuse. And you thought that justified assault? Your grandparents came here with nothing. Have you forgotten that? In the Carters' apartment, the evening became a parade of unexpected kindness. Mrs. Lopez, their elderly neighbor, knocked first, her hands steady as she offered a steaming casserole dish of enchiladas. I saw the news, she said simply, her eyes warm behind thick glasses. Nobody should cook after a day like that. She looked at me, her voice firm. You're a brave girl, Maya. Don't let anyone tell you different. I felt my cheeks heat, a mix of gratitude and embarrassment, and managed a quiet thank you. More neighbors followed Mr. Patel with a tray of samosas, the Garcias with a plate of tamales, each one sharing stories of their own battles with exclusion, their own moments of standing up. The working-class community Ethan had sneered at wrapped us in solidarity, their warmth a balm against Jefferson's cold hierarchy. Mom came home early from her coffee shop shift, her uniform still smelling of espresso, her hands shaking as she pulled me into a hug. I should have done more, she whispered, her voice breaking. When you told me about the bullying, I should have marched to that school. I pulled back, meeting her eyes, red-rimmed and fierce. Mom, stop! You told me to be better than them, to kill them with kindness. I tried. It just wasn't enough. Dad, stirring a pot of chili on the stove, turned, his voice steady but warm. Your mom's right, Maya, but my approach might have been more effective introducing them to accountability. New experience for the Marshall boy. Mom managed a weak smile, her fingers brushing my cheek. Just don't make a habit of intimidating teenagers, James. I laughed, a small, shaky sound, the first crack in the weight I'd carried all day. The apartment, with its chipped paint and second-hand furniture, felt like a fortress now, its walls holding the love of people who saw us, really saw us. My phone kept buzzing, messages piling up from numbers I didn't know. Classmates who'd ignored me now, offering apologies, support, even admiration. I left it face down, too overwhelmed to respond. You know this isn't over, right? I said quietly, my eyes on the table. Ethan's dad has power. What if they come after us legally? Dad set down his spoon, his voice gentle but firm. Maya Marie Carter, we don't make decisions based on fear. We make them based on what's right. Ethan assaulted you. His friends helped. They've been terrorizing you for weeks. If Charles Marshall wants a legal fight, let him try. Truth is a powerful weapon, and we've got 100 witnesses wielding it. I nodded, his words settling into me like stones in a river, steady and sure. Outside, the world was changing, the videos spreading beyond our suburb, parents and strangers alike demanding justice. But here, in this small diner, in our crowded apartment, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just the scholarship kid anymore, the one who didn't belong. I was Maya Carter, and my story was no longer silent. The glittering fortress of Jefferson High was cracking, and the community rising around my neighbors, strangers, even Sophie Reynolds was proof that courage could spark a fire no amount of money could extinguish. The auditorium at Jefferson High School was a sea of restless energy, its high ceiling amplifying the buzz of voices as parents, students, and community members packed the rows, their faces a mix of anger, hope, and determination. The fluorescent lights cast stark shadows on the polished wooden stage, where the school board sat behind a long table, their expressions uneasy, unaccustomed to such a crowd. Maya Carter sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the weight of the day's events still pressing against her chest. Her father, James, sat to her left, his broad frame a steady anchor, his work shirt slightly rumpled from the long day. Her mother, Linda, still in her coffee shop uniform, gripped Maya's hand, her calloused fingers trembling with quiet fury. The videos of Ethan Marshall and his crew's assault in the cafeteria had ignited a firestorm, spreading beyond Jefferson High to the wider Chicago suburb, their raw footage looping on social media, each view fueling demands for change. Tonight, the board faced a reckoning, and Maya, once invisible, was at the heart of it. I sat there, my legs jittery, my heart a wild rhythm I couldn't slow. The auditorium smelled of polished wood and nervous sweat, the kind of tension that hums before a storm breaks. I'd never spoken in front of so many people, never wanted to be the center of anything, but here I was, about to take the microphone. Mom squeezed my hand, her eyes fierce with pride, and Dad gave me a nod, his calm strength a lifeline. I kept replaying the cafeteria Ethan's sneer, the torn pages of my textbook, the way Dad's voice had cut through the chaos. Now, with the world watching, I had to find my own voice. The board president, a gray-haired man with a strained smile, opened the meeting, his voice tight. "We've called this emergency session to address the events at Jefferson High," he said, adjusting his glasses. "We take these matters seriously." A shout from the back cut him off, sharp and unyielding. "You've been taking Charles Marshall's money seriously for years. What about student safety?" The crowd stirred, murmurs rising like a tide, and the president raised a hand for quiet, his composure fraying. "Please, let's maintain order. We've invited several speakers, starting with Maya Carter." My stomach lurched as I stood, my sneakers silent on the carpeted aisle. The microphone loomed like a judge, its stand glinting under the lights. I glanced back at Mom and Dad, their faces steady, and saw Sophie Reynolds in the crowd, her thumbs up a small spark of courage. I took a breath, my voice starting soft but growing stronger, like a river finding its course. "3 weeks ago, I came to Jefferson High with hope," I said, the words trembling at first, then steadying. "I'd earned a scholarship to one of the best schools in Illinois. I thought education was the great equalizer, that merit mattered more than money. I was wrong." The room fell silent, every eye on me, their weight both heavy and empowering. I told them everything, the snide comments, the vandalized locker with "Know Your Place" scrawled in black, the stolen gym clothes, the fake social media account mocking me. I described the cafeteria, Ethan's crew pinning me against the wall, the torn textbook, the humiliation turned into entertainment. "Yesterday wasn't an isolated incident," I said, my voice clear, cutting through the hush. "It was the culmination of a system that values donations over dignity, reputation over rights. Ethan Marshall didn't just decide to attack me. He'd been taught, through years of avoided consequences, that he could do whatever he wanted to people like me." I paused, my eyes finding the board members, their faces pale, uncomfortable. But he was wrong about something crucial. He said I didn't belong here. The truth is, cruelty doesn't belong at Jefferson High. Bullying doesn't belong. A system that protects predators while silencing victims doesn't belong. The auditorium erupted, applause thundering like a storm breaking, shaking the walls. I returned to my seat, my legs wobbling, Dad's hand squeezing my shoulder, Mom's tears glinting in the light. Speaker after speaker followed, their voices weaving a tapestry of truth. Sophie Reynolds stepped up, her usual poise replaced by fierce resolve, presenting a petition with over 800 signatures demanding real anti-bullying policies. "This isn't just about Maya," she said, her voice steady. "It's about every student who's been targeted and ignored because of who their parents are or aren't." Teachers spoke next, some admitting they'd felt pressure to overlook certain students' behavior, their voices heavy with regret. Parents shared stories of their children suffering extorted lunch money, spread rumors, silent fears. The evidence was overwhelming, a chorus of voices that couldn't be silenced. Then Linda Carter stood, her coffee shop apron still tied, her hands clenched with a mother's fury. The crowd hushed, sensing her strength. "Mr. Marshall," she said, her eyes locking onto Charles Marshall in the back, his face a mask of barely contained rage. "Your son physically assaulted my daughter. He destroyed her property. He's been terrorizing her for weeks. That's not a schoolyard scuffle. That's a pattern of criminal behavior you've enabled." Charles rose, his tailored suit a shield, his voice cold as ice. "My son made a mistake," he said, as if granting a concession. "He's young, and young people make poor choices. This witch hunt is excessive, ruining a boy's future over a schoolyard incident." Mom's voice cut through his, sharp and unyielding. "I understand perfectly who I'm talking to," she said, her words steel. "A man who thinks his money makes his son untouchable. I work 2 jobs, Mr. Marshall. I serve coffee to people like you who look through me like I'm furniture. But I'm a mother, and nobody, no matter how rich, gets to hurt my child without consequences." The crowd roared, people leaping to their feet, their applause a tidal wave. Charles stood frozen, his power crumbling under the weight of public defiance. The board president called for order, his voice strained, and announced a closed session to deliberate. The wait was eternal, the auditorium buzzing with nervous energy, whispers and phone screens glowing in the dim light. I sat between Mom and Dad, drawing strength from their presence, my mind racing. Would the board act, or would money win again? 90 minutes later, the board returned, their faces grave. The president cleared his throat, addressing the room. "After careful consideration, we've made the following decisions. First, we're implementing a comprehensive anti-bullying policy with mandatory reporting and clear consequences, applicable to all students, regardless of their families' contributions." The crowd stirred, hopeful but wary. Second, we're creating an independent review committee to investigate all bullying complaints, removing conflicts of interest. Third, regarding the incident involving Ethan Marshall, Lucas Rivera, Noah Bennett, and Liam Harper, we support the administration's recommendation for extended suspension and mandatory counseling. If criminal charges are filed, we'll cooperate fully with law enforcement. The auditorium exploded, cheers mixing with protests from a few parents of the accused. Charles Marshall stormed out, his face thunderous, already on his phone, likely calling his lawyers. The president raised his voice. "Furthermore, we commend Maya Carter for her courage. Her bravery has exposed systemic failures we must address. We're establishing a scholarship fund for students who demonstrate exceptional courage, with Miss Carter as the first recipient, supplementing her academic scholarship to cover all additional expenses." I gasped, tears spilling freely, my hands shaking in Mom's grip. I hadn't asked for this, hadn't expected it, but the crowd was on its feet, their applause a wave of warmth washing over me. As people began to file out, a figure appeared in the doorway. Ethan Marshall, his usual swagger gone, his eyes red-rimmed, his hands unsteady. "Maya," he called, his voice raw, causing the crowd to freeze. Security moved to intercept, but I raised a hand, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "It's okay." Dad tensed beside me, but I stepped forward. Ethan approached, his parents nowhere in sight, his face stripped of its usual mask. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "Not because I got caught, or because I'm in trouble, but because I watched those videos. I saw what I looked like, what I've become, and I'm disgusted. I studied him, searching for the trick, the manipulation, but saw only a boy forced to face himself. I don't expect forgiveness," he continued, swallowing hard. "I don't deserve it. But I'm getting help, real therapy, not some joke my dad arranges. I want to figure out why I became such a monster." The silence stretched, the crowd watching, breathless. I spoke, my voice clear, carrying through the auditorium. "I appreciate your apology, Ethan. But apologies are just words. If you want to make amends, it'll take more than words. It'll take action, consistent action, proving you've changed. Not to me, but to every kid you've hurt. To the next scholarship student who walks through these doors. To yourself." Ethan nodded, his eyes downcast, then turned and walked out, his shoulders slumped. The auditorium buzzed again, the moment a spark in the growing fire of change. As we left, people stopped, us parents, students, strangers offering thanks, support, congratulations. I felt overwhelmed, but also something new, empowered. I'd found my voice, and it had shaken the foundations of Jefferson High's glittering fortress. The night wasn't just a victory, it was a promise that no one, not even a king like Ethan Marshall, could silence the truth forever. The halls of Jefferson High School no longer felt like a labyrinth of whispered taunts and sidelong glances. They hummed with a new rhythm, one of cautious hope and hard-won change. Maya Carter walked through them with a quiet confidence, her worn sneakers steady on the polished floors, her backpack replaced by a kind teacher after the cafeteria showdown slung over one shoulder. The fluorescent lights, once harsh and unforgiving, now cast a softer glow, as if the school itself had exhaled. 6 months had passed since that fateful day in the cafeteria, when Ethan Marshall and his crew had cornered her, when her father, James Carter, had stormed in like a force of nature, shattering the illusion of untouchable privilege. The videos of that confrontation, still circulating under number cafeteria justice, had sparked a revolution not with fists or fury, but with voices demanding accountability. New anti-bullying policies were now etched into the school's core, enforced with a rigor that surprised even the skeptics. A peer support group, led by Maya and Sophie Reynolds, had grown to over 100 members, a vibrant mix of scholarship kids, athletes, and artists, all united by the radical idea that everyone belonged. I stood in front of my locker, no longer marred by black marker or malice, and traced my fingers over its smooth surface, a small ritual of gratitude. The cafeteria, once a battlefield, was now just a place to eat, its chrome fixtures and sprawling food stations no longer a stage for cruelty. My table by the emergency exit was never empty anymore. Kids like me, kids nothing like me, filled it with laughter, stories, and trays of sushi or pizza, their differences a strength rather than a divide. I'd come to Jefferson High wanting to disappear, to survive by being invisible, but that day 6 months ago had chosen me, and I'd chosen to speak. Now, as I walked to class, heads didn't turn away, they nodded, smiled, some even called my name. It was strange, this shift from outcast to, what? Not a hero, not really, but someone who mattered. The transformation at Jefferson High was tangible, measurable. Bullying incidents had dropped by 70%, the numbers proudly displayed in Principal Thompson's monthly newsletter, a testament to the new policy's mandatory reporting, swift consequences, no exceptions for wealth or status. The peer support group, which Sophie and I had started in a cramped classroom with 10 nervous freshmen, was now a force. Its meetings packed with students sharing stories, offering ideas, rebuilding a culture that had once thrived on fear. Sophie, now student body president, was a whirlwind of energy, her perfect ponytail replaced by a messy bun on meeting days, her leadership fierce and grounded. "You taught me what it means to lead," she told me one day at lunch, her eyes earnest. "I used to think it was about being liked. You showed me it's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." I laughed, shaking my head, my fork hovering over a plate of fries. "I just wanted to eat my lunch in peace, Sophie." She grinned, undeterred. "And yet here we are." The girl who wanted to be left alone changed everything. Ethan Marshall was gone, enrolled in a different school in another state, a fresh start his father, Charles, had likely paid dearly for. He'd entered intensive therapy, his letter to me arriving months later, its handwriting shaky but sincere. "I'm keeping my promise," he wrote. "I volunteer at a youth center, working with kids who remind me of who I used to be. I tell them my story, the real one, where I'm the villain and try to help them choose a different path. I don't know if I'll ever atone for the pain I caused, but I'm trying. You changed my life by refusing to let me destroy yours. Thank you, Maya." I read it twice, then tucked it away in a drawer. I didn't reply some bridges stay burned, but I was glad he was trying. That was all anyone could do. Try to be better than yesterday. His crew had faced their own reckonings. Lucas Rivera's parents had pulled him from Jefferson High, enrolling him in a military academy where discipline replaced privilege. Noah Bennett returned after his suspension, quieter, his lawyer parents' influence no match for the school's new resolve. Liam Harper surprised everyone, joining our peer support group, his voice soft but steady at meetings. "I stood there and let it happen," he said once, his eyes on the floor. "I was so scared of being a target that I became something worse, an enabler. I can't undo that, but I can make sure it never happens again." His actions backed his words, his advocacy fierce, a redemption I hadn't expected. Beyond Jefferson High, my story rippled outward, touching places I'd never seen. Local news had picked up the cafeteria videos, and national outlets followed, their headlines painting me as a symbol of courage. Letters poured in from students across the country, their words raw and real. A girl from Texas wrote, "I've been dealing with my own Ethan for 2 years. Your story gave me the strength to tell my parents and principal. He's suspended now, and I'm getting help. Thank you for showing me I wasn't alone." I cried reading it, my fingers tracing her loopy handwriting, her gratitude a mirror to my own survival. Charles Marshall tried to fight back, his lawsuits targeting the school, our family, anyone tied to the incident, but they crumbled as more victims of Ethan's bullying came forward, some with evidence stretching back years. His influence in the community evaporated, his car dealerships no longer a shield, as people distanced themselves from a man who'd enabled cruelty. At the end of year assembly, the auditorium was packed again, but the energy was different, celebratory, not tense. I stood on the stage, the same one where I'd faced the school board, now holding the first Courage in Character award, its plaque heavy in my hands. The crowd, students, teachers, parents watched, their faces warm, expectant. I took the microphone, my voice steadier than it had been 6 months ago, though my heart still raced. When I started here, I thought courage meant suffering in silence. I said, my words echoing through the room. I thought if I kept my head down, endured, things would get better. I was wrong. Courage isn't silence. It's speaking truth, even when your voice shakes. It's standing up, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. I paused, finding Mom and Dad in the crowd, his proud smile, her tears glinting like stars. Ethan thought I didn't belong because my family doesn't have money. But belonging isn't about bank accounts. It's about character, about treating every person with dignity, about using whatever privilege you have to lift others up, not tear them down. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, a roar that shook me to my core. I stepped off the stage, my legs trembling, but my heart full. Back at my cafeteria table, the one by the emergency exit, I was never alone now. Scholarship kids and wealthy kids, athletes and artists, all sat together, their laughter a new kind of music. The school had changed, its glittering fortress no longer a place of fear but one of possibility. Bullying wasn't Ganeno's school as perfect, but it was no longer a shadow that ruled. The peer support group grew, its members a patchwork of stories and strengths, ensuring every new student found a place. As my senior year began, I walked the halls with a quiet assurance, not the false bravado of a bully, but the steady resolve of someone who'd faced fear and won. I still ate at that same table, the one where everything had exploded, but it was different now, full, vibrant, a symbol of what we'd built. Sophie, now a friend as much as a leader, joined me one day, her tray clinking against mine. "You know," she said, her eyes bright, "I used to think leadership meant being popular. You taught me it means being unpopular for the right reasons." I shook my head, smiling. "I didn't mean to teach anyone anything. I just wanted to survive." She laughed, her voice warm. "And yet you changed everything." She was right, in a way. I'd come to Jefferson High as the scholarship kid who didn't belong, but I'd become a legend not through wealth or intimidation, but through courage. The cafeteria doors no longer slammed with menace, they opened wide, welcoming everyone. In that transformed space, where fear had once reigned, a community had grown, built on respect, on the radical idea that everyone had a right to exist without fear. That day in the cafeteria, the worst and best of my life, had forced me to find my voice, and in doing so, I'd helped others find theirs. The revolution Dad had called it wasn't about violence or revenge, it was about refusing to be silenced. And as I looked around at the faces at my table, diverse and unafraid, I knew the greatest victory wasn't defeating Ethan Marshall. It was creating a world where no one like him could flourish again.